Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised that the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, that is right, my friends. You've tuned in to America's Home for Conservative, Not Bitter Talk. I want to continue what we were talking about last hour. If you missed last hour, shame on you, my friends. But you can catch that program wherever you listen to podcasts. You can go to our Rumble channel. The Rumble channel I've had a little bit of an issue with lately. So go to the podcast channel or the website, toddhuffshow.com, and you can listen to last hour. We've been talking about what on earth the Democrat Party is doing. This party has abandoned logic and reason. I know they've done that for some time, but they are getting crazier by the minute. And we were going through some examples of some of the things that's become acceptable in the status quo for the Democrat Party, including the support or the choosing of the un-American American hero of the radical left, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, choosing him over you, my friends. I don't know how else to put this. In fact, it's kind of where I want to pick up are the crazy Democrat senators who flew down to El Salvador to virtue signal, to make this about something that it's not, but we'll get to that. There's just crazy things that's happening left and right around this great nation in the Democrat Party. And friends, I'm here to offer those of you who are reasonable Democrats, conservative Democrats, union Democrats, you need to consider joining forces with those of us like me. You agree with me significantly more than you agree with AOC, then you agree with Ilhan Omar, then you agree with, take your pick, Elizabeth Warren. I got lots of names I could go through. I won't, but you get, Pocahontas, which I can say because I am the official spokesperson for the Pocahontas family, documented by genealogy. That's right, genealogy shows that I am, in fact, the 13th great-grandson, no joke, of Pocahontas. And so I've taken up the banner of being the spokesperson for the family. We don't have a problem with Trump calling Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas. We have a problem with Elizabeth Warren faking an identity to somehow get some sort of a benefit, whether it be through her employer or by appealing to people as an alleged minority to try to garner votes. Anyway, let's start with the folks that flew down to, before we do that, let's start with the folks that fly down to El Salvador, but let's talk about heading up to Alaska, my friends, where you can get wild-caught, fresh Alaskan seafood delivered right to your door. You don't have to fly up to Alaska, although it's a beautiful place, I've heard. I've not been. Every person I know that have gone have loved it. Many say it's their favorite state. Many say it's the most beautiful place they've ever seen. But regardless of where you fall on that list with where Alaska ranks as a state, their seafood is top-notch, and you can get it here in the United States no matter where you are, whether you're from a landlocked state like me, whether you're from a coastal state, it doesn't matter. They can get to you salmon, which includes sockeye, coho, and king salmon. They can get to you shellfish like king crab and snow crab and scallops. They can get this to you. They can get the halibut to you. No matter where you are, it's fresh. It comes quick. It's in vacuum-sealed packages. It comes via overnight air, my friends. So, to get this seafood, all you have to do is go to KenaiFish.com, KENAIFish.com. Again, KENAIFish.com. Promo code Todd saves you 15%, my friends. Again, Kenai is spelled K-E-N-A-I. KENAIFish.com. KenaiFish.com. All right, so let's get to this. So the left is being run by people who find it necessary and beneficial and helpful to fly down to El Salvador. I talked about this the other day. I just want to hit it again to remind you how crazy and disconnected these folks have become. This article here is posted at wokespy.com. Dem polls fly to El Salvador to, quote, bring home El Salvadoran illegally in the U.S. Who knew? The Central American nation of El Salvador in 2025's hottest vacation destination for Democrat politicians from the U.S. Why it has everything: sunny beaches, a good-looking president, and Kilmar Abrego Garcia. How can you not know? Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a household name. Sadly, it's true. Goes through the background of Kilmar Garcia, my friends here, and talks about, if you go down in the article now, Oregon Democrat Representative Maxine Dexter, this was written a couple of days ago, is on her way to Central America, proudly proclaiming that she will not leave El Salvador until Kilmar Garcia is returned to the United States. You know, the U.S. in which he is not a citizen and from which he has been deported. There's no way to make any sense of it. So then, you know, there's people on Twitter talking about, you know, how this works, or on X, I should say. We've got a just craziness. So you have these congressmen who fly down there, again, for the photo op to join Senator Chris Van Hollen from the state of Maryland, which used to be run by, of course, sexy Martin O'Malley. They're down there trying to make a photo op, sipping margaritas. Chris Van Hollen trying to say that Trump is taking away the constitutional rights of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And other congressmen decide to join him, including this Maxine Dexter, who said she wasn't going to leave until Kilmar Garcia was sent home to a state that wasn't his state or her state, for that matter. So this is what's going on. These people are insane. Why does he need to? I understand the concerns about the withholding order and all of that. I'll hear you out on that. But what I won't hear you out on is to say he deserves to be here. He had an issue of a deportation order. So they're concerned more about an individual who's not an American than people who are Americans. In fact, that's what I want to play next. That reminds me, Tom Homan, I think I might have played a similar soundbite yesterday. He was on with Hannity, and Hannity asked him about this situation, and Tom Homan poses the questions for these folks who are going down there, like Senator Van Hollen, like this Democrat Representative Maxine Dexter. He's got some questions that I think all of us, candidly, would like to have an answer to from people like people like Van Hollen. What's going on here? Disconnected from my equipment here. Bear with me here. But I think we want to know. We'd like to know all this stuff. We'd like to know why you seem more concerned about people who are not Americans, people who aren't even supposed to be here, than you do Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat representatives. Then you seem concerned about Americans who have lost their lives, or who were brutally assaulted, or who were died or had their lives dramatically altered from fentanyl and other drugs. Tom Homan's got some questions that I think all of us would like to ask her. Here he is on Hannity.
What message would you send to Van Hollen, these 4 congressmen, the people going to Louisiana to appeal for the student? What message do you have for all of them?
Where were you when thousands of American parents buried their children? They got separated from children forever because they were because they were killed by illegal aliens that entered this country legally. That's preventable crimes. Where were you when the 600% increase in sex trafficking with the Biden administration? Where were you when 10.5 million people came to our borders illegally? Where were you when millions were released in the United States in defiance of federal law? The law says you come to this country, you come to our borders without proper documentation, you shall be detained. Not released, shall be detained. Where were you when they released the millions of people in the United States? Where were you when a record number of people on terrorist watch list crossed this border and were released in the United States with no vetting? Where were you when 250,000 Americans died from fentanyl coming across the border, open border, Biden administration? Where were you then? You were silent, which means you're complicit. You didn't say a word about the violation of laws that put America at great risk. Not just public safety, national security. So where were you then? It's pathetic and disgusting. They are elected by the people to represent the taxpayers of this country. When you don't care about your constituency, when you don't care about public safety and national security, you're an embarrassment to the position you hold. Where were you the last 4 years?
That's right. Where were you the last 4 years? Where were they? They certainly weren't flying around visiting people who suffered because of these individuals. So, that was Tom Homan's questions about these congressmen and senators who are flying down there. Where were they? Where were they when all of this stuff transpired? Where were they when all of these things were allowed to happen to begin with? Where were they when the law was not being enforced? Where were they when Americans were being harmed by people that were not even supposed to be here? Where were they for the past 4 years? And the answer, my friends, is not good. Because, see, this is what reasonable people would ask. This is what reasonable people would care about. I'm not saying you can't be concerned about some of the things with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, specifically, again, being sent to El Salvador when there was at one point, when the initial deportation order was given, there was a withholding order. I understand there's questions, and I'm not glossing over that, but to have this much concern over someone who's not supposed to be here, who Chris Van Hollen was trying to smuggle back into the country, apparently, sipping margaritas with him, as we saw from the photographic evidence. Where were they when the people and families suffered? Where were they at again, it wasn't technically the State of the Union, but where were they at Trump's speech, the semi-State of the Union address, when people stood up who had lost family members at that State of the Union address, some of those at the hands of illegal aliens? Where were they? They didn't stand up and applaud. How pathetic. Where were they? Sitting on their butts. And the truth is that summarizes a lot of what they were doing the last 4 years. They were sitting on their backsides. They didn't care about the pain that was being inflicted upon Americans. They didn't care about how this was causing financial overload in our cities. They did not care that it ushered in drugs and human trafficking. They did not care. This is what caring looks like. They care more about Kilmar Abrego Garcia than they ever cared about you, than they ever cared about the families who lost loved ones. This is sick. This is disgusting. This is despicable. These folks should not be allowed to be the dog catcher for the county, let alone sitting representatives in the House of Representatives or in the U.S. Congress. Tom Homan, as per usual, is spot on right here. These are the sorts of things that are allowed to happen because the radically insane, delusional left has run, they're not now, but they have run the show. What are these Democrats thinking, my friends? What are they thinking? What are they doing to their party? I mean, it is remarkable what we are witnessing politically here. Let's look at another example of outright stupidity. This is an article from legalinsurrection.com. Headline here, Washington Governor Ferguson expands law helping first-time minority homebuyers. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon for the Civil Rights Division is not pleased. Washington Governor Bob Ferguson signed a law expanding the Covenant home ownership program to make it easier for minorities to buy homes. Let me state the obvious here. No one is against minorities buying homes. No one's trying to keep minorities from not buying homes. If anyone is, may this statement serve as a universal condemnation of such policy. That's disgusting and despicable. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about what this program is specifically. So what's this program? Washington, the state of Washington, passed the program 2 years ago meant to help first-time home buyers. If they're descended, now follow this here, if they're descended from someone affected by racist real estate practices in Washington before 1968. So, you have to fall into one of these groups: Black, Latino, Indigenous, Pacific Islander, Korean, or Asian Indian. Those are the categories you must fall into. The Covenant Home Ownership Program offers home buying assistance to minorities who have faced housing discrimination in the past. The program is open to those who lived in or had a parent, grandparent, or great-grandparent living in Washington before 1968 and who met, it should be met here, one of the following government-defined racial identities. I mentioned these earlier: Black, Hispanic, Native American, Alaskan Native, Native Hawaiian, and other Pacific Islander, Korean, and Asian Indian. Launched on July 1st, 2024, the program allows qualified home buyers to apply through their lenders for zero-interest loans to help fund down payments and closing costs. The loans are funded by fees on real estate documents recorded within the state. You go through all this, the bottom line here is that this would allow gifts. So here's a tweet that summarizes this. Governor Bob Ferguson just signed into law the changes to the most outrageous illegal reparations program in the entire country. It now gifts down payments averaging $120,000 to first-time home buyers, again, in those racial groups, ethnic groups, without any proof of direct housing discrimination. So the state is gifting, this is according to Brandy, the synopsis of that bill, of the development of that bill, which of course was referenced in this article. So $120,000 if you're in one of those groups, given to you by the state because of racial discrimination policies that might have impacted someone in your family before 1968. So these are the sorts of things that they're doing. Now, this is Washington State, I understand, and Washington State is run by absolute insane lunatics. In fact, if you were to ask me, Todd, where are the craziest cities in America? Three of them would clearly be on the West Coast. One would be Seattle, which of course was home to Chop and Chaz back in the day. I love that. This is the place where the kiddos, the young adults who didn't come out of the basement very often, they took over a couple city blocks in Seattle, and they were allowed to basically do that. The city didn't take it back. And I remember there were travel sites where you could actually, forget which one it was. I don't remember if it was Travelocity or Expedia or whatever. You could actually search for vacation destinations. I remember reading the article in Chop or Chaz. That lasted, we measure the great empire of Chaz and Chop in hours, because once they ran out of clean underwear, and they wore those a couple times, and they ran out of Jell-O and orange slices from mom, they had to go back home. That's basically what happened. So Seattle's one of those cities, which of course is home to in Washington State. We've got Portland over there as well. That's Antifa crazies and so forth. And then of course San Francisco. Those are some of the craziest cities in America. So it's not surprising to me, but it is still surprising on another level. This is today's Democrat Party. What are they thinking? What are Democrats doing? Now, this sort of thing is getting attention. This sort of thing is concerning people who are Democrats. In fact, I'm going to play for you a soundbite here. This is a clip from CNN. Harry Enton, he is the data guy, I suppose, at CNN, going through some polling data here. specifically talking about Chuck Schumer. In the words of Jeremiah Wright, the pastor of Barack Obama, Americans' chickens are coming home to roost here. So people are finding fault with these Democrats. Now, I just want you to listen to this. This, again, happens to primarily focus on Chuck Schumer, the Senate minority leader. And basically, it's saying that this data is showing that people in the Democrat Party are tired of their leadership. They don't have faith in their leadership. They don't like what their leaders are doing. Now, that's maybe coming from two angles. You may have people that want to oppose this leadership, the current leadership, because they want someone more radical. But I believe that there are certainly people in there who believe we have gone way too far to the left. In fact, Senator Alyssa Slotkin is out there trying to, I don't know if she's jockeying for a position potentially on the Democrat Party's nomination for president. I don't know, but she's out there saying that they've got to divorce this concept of wokeness. You'll remember she gave the rebuttal speech. You probably didn't watch it. Not many people did. I didn't even watch it, and I talk about this stuff. But she gave the rebuttal speech to Trump's joint speech before the joint session of Congress here, a couple of months ago now, or 6 or 8 weeks ago. Anyway, I've got a soundbite to play here, but as I look at the clock, I want you to hear him talking through these numbers. I'm not going to be able to get to it this segment. I just don't have the time or the runway to make that happen. So, friends, let's face it, every dollar that we spend, that you and I spend, is a vote for the kind of America that we want to live in. That's the reality of the world that we live in today. Everything has become political. That's why we launched Freedom Marketplace. It's a free directory where you can go see businesses that align with your conservative values. These businesses have made a promise: no support for leftist candidates, no support for leftist causes. And if they break that promise, my friends, they're going to be booted out of the directory. So they're not going to do it, though. These are principled, freedom-loving, America First businesses. But if you're tired of funding these woke agendas by buying products from folks who are not principled like these folks are, check out freedommarketplace.net. Freedommarketplace.net. It's free, it's easy, and it is, my friends, a good thing to do. I think it's even necessary. It's different than a boycott. Instead of not spending money at places that you want to see suffer, you're actually supporting businesses that are pushing in the same direction that you're pushing. FreedomMarketplace.net, again, is the website. FreedomMarketplace.net, liberty and business for all. Quick timeout for me. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. I'm going to be honest with you. I told Oz this during the break. Sometimes I get so much into what we're talking about, I lose track of things. In fact, I looked up, as I said, and I think it might have been last hour, I looked up and was almost at the end of the segment. This time I looked up and I thought, what segment? Because they're different links, and I had to pause for a minute as I was talking. You could not have noticed it, my friends, because this is a very highly trained broadcasting specialist here, but I wasn't sure for a moment what segment we're in. Here we are in the second segment of the program. I said I wanted to share with you this soundbite. This is Harry Enton on CNN going through some more troubling numbers for the radical left and their leadership, the Democrat Party. That is a major, major problem. People are tired of their leadership and they're looking to do something about it. In fact, some people think that people like Chuck Schumer might see primary challenge, which is kind of alluded to here in this segment. So that being said, let's play it and see what they have to say.
Democrats, how much has their confidence fallen in their leaders?
Yeah, this, I think, is a revolt that is going on within the Democratic Party right now, Democrats and their leaders. I mean, take a look nationally. Hello, Democrats and Dem leaders in Congress. The belief that they will do the right thing when it comes to the economy. Last year at this time, 80% believed that the Democratic leaders in Congress would do the right thing when it comes to the economy. And keep in mind, this is Democrats. Look at where we are now. That number has been slashed in half to just 39%. Holy Toledo, that is the lowest number by far in Gallup polling. The lowest previous was just 60%, which is 21 points higher than this. Democrats hate what their congressional leaders in Washington are doing right now on the key issue of the day, the economy, and their confidence has fallen through the floor, Mr. Berman. All right.
Okay, I'm going to pause that because you can't see. I'm watching the video. You can't see the video, but what he said was, this is a poll of Democrats voting on their leaders in Congress. The question is, will Democrat leaders do the right thing on the economy? In April of 2024, that's just last year, for those of you who are tuning in from the left, who aren't familiar with the calendar, that was just a year ago, 80% of Democrat voters said that they thought their leaders would do the right thing regarding the economy. 12 months later, 1 year later, that number has been, as he said, halved. It's been cut in half. In fact, slightly more than half. 39%. Now, what does this mean? What are they mad about? Again, or is it people who are, take your pick. Are they mad that the Democrats aren't trying to stop Trump and the tariffs? Are they mad because they've suddenly seen how inflation is significantly better for the consumer, better for the American family, the taxpayer, under Republicans than it was under Democrats? Are they upset that the Democrat Party under Chuck Schumer hasn't fully embraced the socialistic aspects that the left, like Bernie Sanders and AOC, are out there propping up? The answer might be yes to all of that. In fact, if you listened to the opening segment of the first hour, you would have heard me say, I marvel in a sense, just in a sense here, I marvel at the Democrat Party's ability to bring together a bunch of people who have just totally different interests. They're not really unified around anything except for their hatred of Trump, of Republicans, of the MAGA movement, of Elon Musk. That's really what they're in favor of, hatred towards those folks. But they believe in a bunch of crazy stuff. So it's hard. I marvel that they're able to get those groups of people together to vote for the same candidates. Well, maybe this is proof that that coalition is breaking, because it is it's ultimately an untenable, sort of position here to have these different groups, single issue groups, all pushing in the same direction. I don't know, but they're not happy. That's the bottom line. They're not happy with what's going on as it pertains to the economy. But there's more, as you'll find out in this dialogue.
Chuck Schumer is the Senate Democratic leader right now. How are feelings about him, particularly in New York?
Yeah, let's go to the state of New York. It's what's always on my mind, right? We're in the state of New York right now. New York Democrats on Chuck Schumer view him favorably. In December of 2024, that was just a few months ago, it was 73%. Look at where that number has fallen to in just a few months. It is now down to just 52%. That is the lowest I could ever find in Siena College on how Democrats in Chuck Schumer's home state view him. And keep in mind, if you're thinking about a primary challenge, it would be a few years away. But Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's favorable rating among Democrats is considerably higher, in the 60s. So he is doing quite poorly in his own home state of New York. I never thought I'd see the day in which just 52% of New York Democrats would view Chuck Schumer favorably. It's almost unfathomable.
Yeah, all right, pausing there to go through it again. You're not looking at the graphic. This is a poll of New York Democrats, Siena College. They're doing a poll on Chuck Schumer. Specifically, he's the Senate Minority Leader, the Democrat Party leader in the Senate. His favorability rating in this poll is at 52%. This is among Democrats in New York. These are these are actually his constituents. I know last week I shared an article, maybe it was this week, I shared an article that Politico said that Chris Van Hollen was meeting with one of his constituents who'd been deported to El Salvador, this Kilmar Abrego Garcia that we've talked a lot about. The truth is, Kilmar Abrego Garcia is not a constituent of Chris Van Hollen. I don't care where he puts his feet, he's not a legal voting person. He's not supposed to be in our country. Therefore, he shouldn't be casting ballots, and he's not represented. You can't represent somebody who isn't even supposed to be here in this country. So, but these are actual constituents voting for Chuck Schumer. Just a few months ago, 4 months ago, Chuck Schumer's favorability among Democrats in New York was at 73%. Today, it is at 52%. It's dropped 21 points in just 4 months. They are taking it, my friends, on the chin. But they're not done. There's more to say.
The tiny footnote here, I think it will look much bigger to the Schumer team this morning as they look at that. When you're talking about Chuck Schumer, why? Is there an answer to your question? Is there an answer to the question of why his ratings dropped?
Yeah, it's because they simply put don't like the job he's doing as Senate leader. I mean, look at this. Should Schumer stay as Senate leader? Again, according to New York Democrats, just 50% say yes. Look at this number. 48% say no. This screams sirens should be going off. Primary challenge, primary challenge, primary challenge. When you're a Democrat in New York and these are your ratings, this is a big wake-up call if you're Chuck Schumer, John Berman.
Harry Etten, thank you very much. I'm glad we're using last names this morning.
All right, so I don't want to go through the silly shenanigans there in this rest of this video, but the bottom line is, if you look at Democrats in New York, half of them want Chuck Schumer to stay as the Senate leader. Half of them want him to go, 50-48. And so this begs the question, I suppose, as to what could potentially happen. What are we setting up for? You'll remember earlier, again, it might have been this week. Time flies when you're having fun here. I can't remember if it was this week or last week, but I shared with you, I think it was this week. Nate Silver said the early indication that the front runner for the Democrat Party, actually, I don't know if I know it was a Todd Talk as I'm saying this. I don't know how much I talked about it on the program. But one of the front runner in his mind right now for the Democrat nominee for president is AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who, of course, calls New York home. So is she going to make a move to be the senator from the state of New York? Is she going to throw her hat into the presidential race? I know, listen, on paper, and for those of us who think ideas matter, this is craziness. These sorts of leftist ideas have been soundly defeated. But in a world where superficiality still reigns, can she convince enough people to vote for her? I would think seems crazy to me, but who knows what they're going to do. This may be the best. Who else do they have? That's the other thing. Who is the clear choice for the Democrats, my friend, to be the nominee or to become the Senate, the leader in the Senate? I don't know who that is. I don't know. Maybe it's Alyssa Slotkin. I'm not sure. Anyway, my friends, before I wrap up this segment, let me remind you that Solti is a product that has been proven to lower cholesterol. If you have high cholesterol, if you have a family history of high cholesterol, if you have a family history of heart problems, if you're just wanting to be proactive to stay healthy, consider taking Solti. It's an all-natural supplement that you can take. It's just a couple of soft gels a day. They're very reasonably sized soft gels. Take those, avoid the medications, the doctor's visits. You may still need to do that. I'm not against that, but this is a great first place to start. It's affordable, especially with our discount, Solti.com, SOLTEA. Promo code Todd will get you big savings. Solti.com, SOLTEA.com, promo code Todd. I got to wrap up here this segment. Back in a minute, my friends. Welcome back, my friends. Last segment of the week. I know it is a sad time, but friends, you can always go back and listen to archives of anything that you've mentioned. You can follow us on social media as well. I mentioned becoming a member of the Inner Circle, a lifetime. There's lots of things you can do that you can find out about by visiting our website, ToddHuffShow.com. But I hear you. This is a very, very disappointing time to know that we're in the last segment of the week. I know the feeling. I remember feeling that way when I used to listen to Rush. Friends, I want to get to this final story here that I want to hit on today. This is at Politico.com. It's an exclusive story. Slotkin is testing a war plan to beat Trump. She wants Dems to ditch wokeness and muscle up. That's the headline here. The Michigan senator will give the first in a series of political speeches on Thursday. So this is dated a couple of days ago. Thursday, of course, in our rearview mirror. But I want you to listen to this. Alyssa Slotkin, the former CIA analyst turned battleground senator, will on Thursday start road testing what she calls a war plan to, quote, contain and defeat Donald Trump. In the first of a series of speeches, by the way, I'm doing this now because it is the result of everything else that we've talked about today. So we don't do themes on this program. We talk about what's happening in the news, what's going on in our country and so forth, the intersection of politics, faith, and culture. And so Alyssa Slotkin, is responding to all the things I talked about. And there's a whole lot more, by the way. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the woke stuff that's been happening, the trans agenda, the Washington governor who signed this reparations bill for housing assistance into law, all of these things that are out there, some of them at state levels, some of them at federal levels, but all of them impacting the Democrat brand. It's not good. And so they're trying to do something about it. Alyssa Slotkin has found herself in a position where she can have some influence, I suppose, here, actually potentially do something about it and maybe find herself on a path to being a presidential candidate. I don't know. But it says this in the first of a series of speeches about the Democratic Party's path out of the wilderness. The Michigan senator said she will span everything from strategy to tactics and tone, acknowledging public perception of the party as weak and woke needs to change. She is urging Democrats to effing retake the flag, I guess is how I would communicate that to you, with appeals to voters' sense of patriotism, to adopt the, alpha energy of Detroit Lions coach Dan Campbell, and to embrace an airing out of potential 2028 presidential candidates in a broadly contested primary. So, skipping down here a little bit, it says this: Trump is doing a whole bunch of things that I think are a threat to our economy and a threat to our democracy, and I have a responsibility on behalf of my state to point that out and try to do something about that. That's what Alyssa Slotkin, told Politico in an interview outlining her speech ahead of delivering it to an audience of home state Democrats and volunteers in Lansing on Thursday afternoon. Of the stark and militaristic language featured in a draft version, she added, quote, I thought it was very important to put something down on paper, but it wasn't to liken him to ISIS or anything like that. What? What is that? Trump has taken out ISIS. Every time ISIS seems to appear on the scene or to grow, it's when a Democrat's in office. And then Trump comes along and does something about it. What does she mean? She's not trying to. She had to clarify that. She had to clarify to Politico that she wasn't trying to liken him to ISIS. The world is she talking about? It was just to say, if you want, going back to the quote here, it was just to say if you want to counter something that you see as a problem, you got to have a plan, or what else are you doing? She said. So the plan here, again, her words, their words, not mine, is to address the public perception of the Democrat Party as being weak and woke. Now, isn't it interesting? I don't have a lot of time here left, but I find it interesting. I've shared this story before. Maybe I'm in the extreme minority here, but I don't think, I start with what is. I don't come on here and try to say, how can I make someone think I am this? I just think, that's what I think is true. I just think that's what I want to be. That's what I want to, articulate. That's what I want to explain. I've shared this before, that analogy or a story of when I was working with a youth group. And I remember the youth pastor at the time, he had said to our students how important it was for people to see that these kids had a faith in Jesus. And look, I don't dispute that as a fellow Christian. But if your focus is on what other people see, suddenly you can see where, biblically speaking, you can start to think like a Pharisee. You can start to think like a legalist. Instead of just thinking, let me be something and then radiate that, let that shine through me. The Bible says, if we want to get a little bit into the scripture here in the waning moments, the Bible says, let your light shine. It doesn't say make your light shine. It doesn't say make sure people see your light shine. It says let your light shine. They are trying here to change the perception instead of changing the reality. I would recommend they change the reality if they're supporting candidates as weak and woke. But I've got to go. Out of time here. Have a great weekend, SDG.